All right, folks, we're looking here now at the first area of expansion, which was Alaska. Now, this is not as late in the century as some of the other ones we would talk about here, but it is. Oops, I gotta quit touching the mouse. It's always troublesome. It's not as late in the century, but it still is part of this expansion. So the U.S. had already had the experience of just straight up purchasing new property, which was the Louisiana Purchase. It had gone very well and had done a lot as far as making the U.S. a massive territory. And so with Alaska, there had been the opportunity to purchase the territory from Russia. They had kind of put it up for sale, so to speak, on, I don't know, maybe nations use a special form on Craigslist. I'm not sure how they go about it, but they offered the sale of the country, and the U.S. had been interested, but then the Civil War had gotten in the way. And so once we got past all that, the U.S. is interested once again, and so in 1867, the U.S. pays Russia, who had been in control of the area since had been in control of the Alaskan region since the late 1700s. They paid them $7.2 million, which is also a pretty good deal. Not quite as good a deal as the Louisiana Territory purchase, because that had been 828,000 square miles, and this one was only 586. So not super massive, but still incredibly large amount of territory for a relatively small amount of money. The Russian ambassador had gotten the U.S. involved in negotiations starting in 1866, and Russia, for its part, did not really feel that it was benefiting from the territory. They thought it really didn't have enough valuable resources, and it couldn't be easily colonized, and it was hard to defend it because it was so large and, cold and, just out of the way. And so the, sort of the cost benefit analysis for Russia was that this just isn't really worth it for us. This was obviously before anyone knew that there was gold in the region, or that it was had the huge oil reserve, but that's just par for the course when they didn't know about that. So the U.S. had desire for, and the Russians also had debt from the Crimean War that had been going on, and so that using, much like Napoleon had debt that he needed to pay and made it more acceptable to sell off the Louisiana Purchase, Russia is now selling off the Alaskan region, and so that benefits the U.S. in that regard. There had been two reports that the Smithsonian Institution had sent expeditions in 1859 and 1865 to just survey the area, check it out, see if the U.S. was interested in it. And they came back with reports saying that they thought that it had abundant natural resources and that long-term the U.S. would benefit. And so a lot of the people who were detractors about getting into the territory got on board with the idea. And so they were able to get that on board and make it happen by 1867. So for the next almost 2 decades, the U.S. doesn't do much with the Hawaiian region. We're going to get to Hawaii, the Alaskan region, but they basically it's under military control. By 1884, they finally are able to shift it from a territory to a district with an actual government, and then it really takes off when they discover gold in the area, and that's when the Alaskan gold rush happens. So we have the 1849ers, heading out to California, which makes that area grow, and then Alaska is going to grow 1897 to about 1900, and then again in 1903 in some different areas. So people are just scrounging around for gold and mining quickly, and a lot of people are pouring into that area. And so this area is going to sort of stay in that mode of territory, kind of frontier sensibility, at least in the regards of the U.S., until the 1950s. It doesn't reach statehood until 1959. So it's going to be a long process for it. But if you want to learn more about this, and that's sort of your homework for this week, part of that, the videos that you'll find below. One is a very short one. It's a pretty video from Smithsonian talking about the Alaska Purchase and Alaska in general, and then there is a lecture from the American Institute in Moscow, and the lecturer does a good job with a lot of good imagery and more detailed discussion from a specialist in this on this process of the Alaska Purchase. And it's not something that gets lectured on a lot, and so you don't see a lot of those. And this one is particularly good. She's an engaging lecturer, so I encourage you to check that one out. And I'm going to pause the video there, and I'll put the videos on Russia, or on the Russia and Alaskan Purchase right below this one, and then we'll come back and just to make sure that we have plenty of time for the discussion of Samoa and Hawaii.